This is Russell Brand. If you're unfamiliar, he's like this far-right British nutcase, basically. He's kind of like the British Joe Rogan, and he's absolutely terrible. He commented on the French elections recently. If you don't know what happened, French elections 2024, the left won big. And the right, all over the United States and Canada, France, and Britain, they're all freaking out about it. Funny enough, in the United States is the only place where people are claiming election fraud in France. Like, literally nobody else is. Let's listen to what he has to say here. While we listen, we're going to play some Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Should just be in the background. Won't bother you too much. You never played before.
Hey, you Awakening Wonders. Thanks for joining me today for Stay Free with Russell Brand. Across
You're quite welcome, good sir.
the world, we are forced to question how electoral democracies are managed and what the function of democracy is now, how its mechanics operate. I'm asking that question, I suppose, on the basis that in two countries, you would have, I'm talking about France and the UK, clear victories for particular parties. In the case of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer's Labour Party, and in France, this extraordinary conglomeration of multi-layered alliance that has led for a victory for the French left. And there are aspects of that alliance that are pretty interesting. There are sort of anti-war components. There are some pretty awakened movements that emerged, I assume, from that Gilets jaunes moment in France. But what you're
Awakened moments.
left with, I think, when you analyze the results as best as I can using my mind and this pen, you're left with the idea that potentially the results are not all they initially seem.
No, they are. The results are as they seem. Literally nobody is questioning the French elections' legitimacy except for, like, Trump nutcases, an American, like, right-wing extremists, and, like, a couple of Canadian nutcases.
Nevertheless, here is a bit of celebratory footage of the people of France.
Celebratory.
Some pretty good-looking people, but one person who's clearly been selected because of his potentially antagonistic resemblance to Che Guevara. This is footage from Rebel News.
Okay, it says, "We beat you." She's a woman, like, dancing, saying, "We beat you." Yep. This is what you say. You lost. The left is too strong.
On est trop fort à gauche, on a l'amour, on a la
We have love, we're celebrating, and we have joy.
fête, on a la joie, vous avez la haine.
And you, your hatred, we are too strong.
On est trop fort, on est trop fort. Vous avez perdu, désolé.
We won. Middle fingers.
Et c'est des racistes.
You're racist.
Voilà, c'est tout.
Oh, yeah, okay. You know what? I thought for sure he was going to be full of shit with the Che Guevara thing.
Peux pas laisser faire enculer.
But that guy, wherever he went, this guy,
Raciste.
he's dressed to look like Che Guevara, right? Unless there's, like, some cultural thing I don't know about France that explains this.
Voilà, c'est tout.
Che Guevara, if people are unfamiliar, commonly associated with the communist revolution in South America and Cuba. I think the guy knew Fidel Castro from Cuba. Like, there are pictures of them together and stuff. Anyway, he's associated with the communist revolution, but the reason that people, like, dress like him in the first place isn't because of his communism. It's because of his revolutionary attitude. He fought the system and he won. And that's very inspiring to some people. So, anyway, that's why he's probably wearing the Che stuff. He was not a good person, for what it's worth. Quick interjection, this won't take long, I promise. I'd appreciate it if you watched to the end of the video, or at least a couple extra seconds, because YouTube bases its algorithm off of watch time. The more watch time a video has, the further the video will go. Also, take a look at my website, owenmorgan.com. I'm selling my book, Understanding Jehovah's Witnesses, 400 pages, and my second book, 100 Questions for Jehovah's Witnesses, which is about 80 pages. And you can find them both there on the website. Audio form, ebook form, whatever. It's about my experiences within the religion, and the history of the religion generally. The 100 questions are intended to challenge a religious leader, so I'd appreciate it if you give it a read. Okay, back to the video.
Peux pas laisser faire enculer. C'est tout, c'est tout. Vous avez perdu.
Haha, you lost. Haha, yeah. So they're just like gloating, which is fine. Yeah, they have the right to gloat. Absolutely. We're staying.
There you go. Being against racism, of course, is a very, very good thing. Good to not be racist. But are we sure that we understand precisely what's taken place in France? I'm not sure that I understand, of course. But what I do know is that Macron is still and will remain president, and that 200 candidates dropped out of the race in an attempt to, a successful attempt, to strategize and tactically beat the Rally National, the
Okay, and people are viewing this as like crooked, that people dropped out to give Macron a chance at winning or whatever. That's not what happened. That's not how the system works. And saying that betrays a deep ignorance about how the system in France works. First of all, if 200 people did drop out to give Macron a chance, that's the right thing to do. That's democracy, baby. That's what it's all about. But again, that's not exactly what happened. France has a system that's kind of a mix of first past the post, what we have in America, and ranked choice to some degree. They're similar, I suppose. It's kind of like a mix of a primary and a general. So everybody votes for who they want, whoever it is. It doesn't matter because the first election is irrelevant, as in it doesn't count. So you vote for whoever, and a lot of the times you'll have like 200 different people in the field, left, right, and center. And then the top two people who won the election will get to run in the second round of voting in France. And the people have to choose between the left or the right at that point, pretty much. Like, they have no other choice but the ones that are on the ballot now. So technically, the right, Le Pen, I think is her name, she got technically more votes than the other parties. As in, she got like 30 or 40% or something. But the other parties, the ones that are not, like celebrating when homeless people are shot in the streets or whatever, the total number of votes that the left and center candidates had was 60% or something. So in the second round of voting, with only two candidates left, all of the other people said, you know what? I could live with Macron. I don't think I could live with, Le Pen, but Macron is okay. He's not terrible. That's what happened. That is not strategizing or the left being devious or whatever. That's democracy. First time?
They're usually called the far-right participants. So, listen, let's have a little look at that. Yeah, that's right, mate. Let's have a look at this. Because what's interesting about this alliance is that some of the parties are like environmental, some of them are far left. There's like 9 communists, actual old school.
I don't think that. Okay, maybe, I suppose. But, communism is a word that's used to freak people out in this context. So just be skeptical.
Communists. And the guy that's most prominent at the moment, this person they're going to have to bury, I think. What's he called? Mélenchon, I think is his name. This dude they're going to have to bury because he's going to be a massive pain in the arse. Now, first we'll look at this. We'll look at the results of the French election, the way that these results were achieved, and we'll compare it to the UK election and how those results were achieved. It's much more institutional in our country. The UK proportional representation favours the two major parties, but in France there's been some extraordinary sort of in real time gerrymandering, deals being done, people dropping out of the.
Oh my God, dude. There's nothing crooked about how this system works. He's just describing the system and then complaining about it. Really?
The race in order to prevent the far right, who did receive the majority of the votes, from achieving the ascendancy that seemed likely. Now, I wonder if ultimately there will be a mandate for the kind of people that are celebrating, who appear to be, on the basis of this, anti-racist and anti-war. And I reckon we're all anti-racist.
No, you can pretend to be, you're not.
And anti-war, aren't we? If you're watching us on YouTube, we'll be there for about another 15 minutes. Then we'll be streaming exclusively on Rumble. And to those awakened wonders, let me know what you thought of my 5 favourite things that I just can't live without. I'm going to show you a little bit of that in a minute.
Does he enunciate the sound TH, or is he just saying an F in its place? I can't tell.
Delightful little conglomerate. Here's some analysis now so we can look at what this new composition that makes up the French government is in fact made up of. All four parties said they'd made concessions. The NFP, that's the new alliance, program is heavily influenced, or the sort of largest part of it, influenced by that of the radical left LFI, including pledges that would significantly increase France's already high public spending. It promises to reverse Emmanuel Macron.
Oh my God. This is just biased all the way down, obviously, right? Holy Christ, dude, I suck. I suck at this. I'm starting over. They have a thing in a lot of ex-British governments, or British governments, or Britain-influenced governments. I would call France kind of Britain-influenced to some degree. They have a thing called dissolving the government. And it's not actually like, all right, wow, I suck. I really suck at this. It's not like deleting the government or whatever, but it's holding new elections. That's what that means, dissolving the government. Dissolving and reforming. And it's been like this for like a really long time. Anyway, Macron, I don't know. I don't think that they called it this, but they called it snap elections. Macron held a snap election. Kind of a risk because you might get people in office who you really don't want there. You might like lose ultimately, but he called a snap election so that they would hold new elections and see if he still has a mandate to lead, if you will. And the answer is very clearly yes, he does.
Macron's controversial changes to pensions and return.
He's speaking with an accent that often substitutes an F for a TH. I know. If it was a lisp, I wouldn't say a word because that's just jag-off territory. But since it's an accent, I'm going to make fun of him.
Turn the retirement age to its pre-2010 level of 60, raise public sector wages, link salaries to inflation.
Dude, I'm bad at this. I don't understand. Why is this so difficult?
Controversial changes to pensions and return the retirement age to its pre-2010 level of 60, raise public sector wages, link salaries to inflation, boost housing and youth benefit, cut income tax and social security for low earners, and introduce a wealth tax for the rich. All pretty good ideas so far, you would think, wouldn't you? Pretty good.
Well, I don't think Russell Brand's audience would think.
So, listen to this. NFP also aims to raise the minimum wage, fine, fund 500,000 childcare places, why not, cap prices for essential foods, electricity, gas and petrol, boost green measures, including legislating for carbon neutrality by 2050, and overhaul the EU's common agriculture policy. You know how controversial agricultural policy, particularly coming out of the EU, has been in the last 5-10 years. And of course, carbon neutrality is an idea that's spoken about and causes a lot of controversy.
No, it doesn't cause a lot of controversy. It's only among his weird little nutcases. Those are the only people that find it controversial.
In this space. What I'd be interested in is if the measures spoken of here, most notably the environmental ones, will lead to restrictions and legislation on individual freedom rather than the, for example, tempering and controlling the profits and activities of international global corporations, including and most obviously energy corporations. On foreign affairs, the
Like, I don't understand. So he wants to temper the influence of international corporations, including energy corporations. Okay. You can do that by, like, passing climate change initiatives.
Answer said it would demand an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. What do you reckon to that in the chat? Recognize Palestine. Okay. Halt Moscow's war of aggression in Ukraine. Keep supplying arms to Kiev and unfailingly defend the sovereignty and freedom of the Ukrainian people.
Love it. Love everything about it.
But the dude that's Mélenchon, not Mélenchon, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who's currently the leader of the LFI, the largest part of one aspect of this alliance, because the alliance is Macron's bunch, this little bunch called the NFP, which itself is made up of a cluster of organisations, meaning that France is likely to be pretty unstable and doubly unstable, I suppose, because the whole conglomeration has been put together to prevent the ascent of the right. That was the sort of function of it. But then you wonder where all all of that energy goes. It's sort of it's comparable to what will happen in the UK when Reform have 800,000 people behind every seat in Parliament. They've got 5 seats in Parliament. And Labour have 30,000 people behind every seat in Parliament. And Nigel Farage has come right out of the block saying immigration is going to be the issue that I'm going to fight on. It's always the issue that Nigel Farage fights on.
Farage is like the right-wing Trump, effectively. He's a complete scumbag and a Russian shill, and terrible in every single way.
How will Starmer deal with that? How will these victories ultimately for centrists, although many people have pointed out, how are they victories for centrists if they've had to form alliances with parties and groups of the left, ? How will they govern from what seems to be a precarious position? It's pretty interesting because in the sort of cooperative that's been formed here, for example, there are a variety of views on pretty significant issues, for example, Gaza. And I wonder how they're going to manage this in government. It's going to be pretty interesting, I would think, and will likely lead to fissures and maybe even chaos. There's been a lot of instability in France. In fact, this snap election was an attempt to mitigate control and bring down that chaos. Same in the UK, because why did the Conservative Party call an election that was inevitable that they were going to lose and significantly lose? Presumably, it's part of an overall agenda to maintain some semblance of control. And the more cynical among...
Dude, is this guy saying anything at all? I feel like he's just rambling nonsensically right now. Is there anything of substance in here?
You would say, would simply cite the Who's song, Meet the New Boss, same as the old boss. Indeed, I think that's what PJW did on his video.
The left is not the same as the right. I know this is like a popular thing to say. They're not the same, okay? They're not.
Analyzing it. So, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, 72. Did you like the French accent? It's a pretty good attempt, I thought, and I don't think I overdid it. I didn't go like...
He was doing a French accent?
Mélenchon, didn't try to make it like overly sexy. Had promised to take a back seat. This guy I think is going to be funny. Keep your eye on this guy. Had promised to take a back seat in the NFL.
Oops, sorry. I didn't mean to pause.
I didn't go like Mélenchon. Didn't try to make it like overly sexy. Had promised to take a back seat. This guy I think is going to be funny. Keep your eye on this guy. Had promised to take a back seat in the NFP, but has been unable to do so, demanding on Sunday that France's next Prime Minister come from the alliance and implement our manifesto and only our manifesto. Power's got near him. The elixir of power. It turns people crazy. People, when managing the business of politics, people make whatever compromises they have to make. That's why you've heard Keir Starmer say, I'd never work with the Sun. I'm working with the Sun. I prefer Davos to Westminster. People will drop whatever they need to drop, acquire whatever they need to acquire to get into power, and then people change once it's extraordinary power.
Wow. Really? Are you... Knock me over the feather. Are you shitting me? People change when they get power? That's too much. I can't believe it. I'm sorry. He's saying absolutely nothing of substance right now. This is complete, meaningless garbage. Please, say something valuable. Anything.
It's mercurial magic is unleashed on the mind. People start, because I suppose, maybe because there aren't sufficient virtues and principles that are beyond the remit of selfhood that ultimately motivate people. Maybe that's why we get in trouble. What I'm saying, not...
Did that mean anything, what he just said? Did those words go next to each other?
To be opaque is if all of us were dedicated to a project of salvation and redemption, if all of us were individually contributing to the common good, although I recognise there are people in the world that are doing that naturally, and not all of them are Christian, I'm not suggesting that for a second, then we would...
Okay, nobody accused you of suggesting that.
Have different systems, wouldn't we? Representative of a higher set of values. We're going to see a chaotic period in France. We're going to see a chaotic period in the UK because there are these escalating wars. There is the necessity to implement further and further authoritarianism, more and more censorship, because otherwise what's happening in France, this fragmentation and fracture, would happen everywhere. You can't achieve consensus. You can't achieve cohesive and continual control of a narrative because, as that book said, here comes everyone. We're all piping up from the sidelines. That's not true. Keir Starmer didn't support Assange when he was in opposition. Why not? When he was head of the CPS, why was he not looking for ways to get Assange out of Belmarsh? We can all see that. Hey, we've got footage.
Dude, what is this guy going on about right now? I know he's talking about Julian Assange, who I think wasn't he just pardoned or something? I don't remember. Something happened with Assange that was good for him. I personally was not in favor of Assange being freed, honestly. I don't think. It wasn't an issue of press freedom, in my opinion, but whatever.
of Keir Starmer saying, they can't maintain control in the good old days of CNN and BBC and centralised authority. The pre-communications miracle era meant that centralised control was plausible. It's not plausible anymore. Back to Jean-Luc Mélenchon. He's even suggested he'd quite like the job himself, having said, look, I don't want any power. Now that the power's come near, like the ring's gotten him. He suggested he would quite like the job himself, but his frequent outbursts of rage, love that, petty attacks on opponents, he's petty, reflexive anti-US stance, Europhobia, and before Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, frequent Moscow-friendly remarks have made him too toxic. So this dude, they're not going to be pushing for him. Mélenchon has also faced accusations of anti-Semitism, recently describing the attendees of a demonstration against anti-Semitism as the friends of unconditional support of the Gaza massacre, and appearing to minimize anti-Semitism in France by describing it as residual. He denies these accusations. Many of Mélenchon's fellow NFP, that's the new alliance that are teamed up with Macron's crew to win this election, cannot stand him. They don't like the dude. Now, remember that prior to Keir Starmer in the UK, the Labour Party was run by Jeremy Corbyn, and that guy had to be exorcised, booted out of the party.
Jeremy Corbyn was the leader of the Labour Party, or is? I'm not sure, in Britain.
Along with any allies or even remnants of him. So now we've got the extraordinary situation where it seems to me a Corbyn-like politician, i.e. an old-school leftist, has ascended to a position of power and is having to make deals with the new sort of globalist WF types, of which Macron is one of the OGs. If there was a Klaus Schwab boy band, you better believe that Macron, next to Trudeau and now Starmer, would be front and centre, and the drool
We're going to talk about Klaus Schwab in a second.
from Schwab's pouches, his significant hamster pouch cheeks would be glazing them. They would be glazed in glory. Many of Mélenchon's
All right, let me just mention Klaus Schwab real quick. Klaus Schwab is front and center of a conspiracy called the Great Reset, and I don't know about you guys, but like, I had no idea what the Great Reset was or what it meant or whatever. Like, most conspiracy theories, I can put a name to them. Chemtrails. They're releasing chemicals into the atmosphere, changing your personality or whatever. Or lizard people. Lizard people are running the world. What the hell is the Great Reset, right? The answer to that is complex and winding, obviously. Oh my God, dude, I hate this stupid track. There was this big organization called the World Economic Forum, who's like an organization for rich people. They invite rich people to go to their summits, and I mean filthy rich, globally filthy rich people. Elon Musk, Bill Gates, George Soros, Donald Trump, those types of people is who they would invite. I don't know if they actually invited Trump or not, but anyway, they invite them to these places, and the people that work for the World Economic Forum write up plans for how best to solve societal problems in the world. Like, there's a polio outbreak in, the Congo. If we had like $50 million, we could produce enough vaccines for everybody, and it would kill the polio outbreak there, for example. So the WF writes up this big detailed breakdown of how much they need and what that money would go to and who they would work with and everything. And they present that proposal to the World Economic Forum people. And the WF people like Musk or Gates or Soros will put that money up to better the world. That's what the World Economic Forum is. And every year, the WEF awards people with, the most helpful to society or whatever, the most helpful to humanity, giving the most money or doing the most shit. Bill Gates has, I don't know if this is specifically through the WEF, but Bill Gates has built tons of vaccine production plants to help people. But of course, our old buddy Russell Brand here's anti-vax. So anyway, the WEF, after COVID started, said, this is our opportunity. While these economies are in flux, this is our chance to reset the economies to be more beneficial to the lower and working class rather than the ultra rich. And just like that, oh God, and just like that, a conspiracy theory rose from the ashes out of nowhere. What's the complaint here about this great reset? Yeah, that would be fantastic. Absolutely. We should be resetting the economy to be more beneficial to the working class, of course. And then Justin Trudeau of Canada famously said something like, "Oh my God, dude, I'm so close. I hate this race. I hate this race. It is the absolute literal worst." Anyway, Justin Trudeau came out in a video around that time and said, "This is an opportunity to reset our economies to be more beneficial to the poor," or something like, I don't remember exactly what his words were, but that blew it out of the water, just exploded from there. The Great Reset conspiracy did. So what is the conspiracy? It's that the ultra rich are trying to like take control of the governments of the world, exercising power through this WEF, and they're trying to vaccinate everybody to make them like, less intelligent and make them like robot slaves and shit. If you can think of the conspiracy, then it's included in the Great Reset, pretty much. It's crazy. It's absolutely nuts and nonsensical garbage. But isn't it interesting that a conspiracy, or let me rephrase, an organization that associates itself with very, very wealthy people comes in and says, like, this is our opportunity to make things better for the not very, very wealthy. And just like that, seemingly out of nowhere, everything explodes. Oh my God, I finally won. Jesus Christ. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, seemingly, everything explodes, and everybody is like pointing fingers at the WEF saying how evil they are and everything. Weird, huh? Is that odd to anybody else? Rich people's wealth is threatened, and suddenly there's a conspiracy theory about it. Huh? Anyway, it's just a joke. Another thing that like you can't really put your finger on, like what the hell is this all about? World War I. I could never figure out what World War I was about until I like really dug into it deeply. The answer to what was World War I over was, just if you're curious, the Austrian leader, I don't remember his name, or I remember his name, Franz Ferdinand, the Austrian dictator, I don't know what he was. He was assassinated by a Serb because the Serbs are being terribly persecuted by Austria. So Austria decides to invade Serbia. And Germany, who is like friends with Austria and just to the north of them, decided to take that opportunity. They said, hey, everyone else is going to war. I might as well go to war too. Why not? And they decided to try to take Bulgaria and Luxembourg. Is that right? That could be wrong. Anyway, it did not end well for them, obviously. They were forced to give up. But World War II was, a direct result of grievances from World War I, basically. Anyway, that's unrelated, but that's the Great Reset conspiracy. That's the bottom line. All right, let's keep listening to this poor fool.
Fellow NFP members can't stand him, and LFI defectors who have abandoned the party over his bullying tactics. He's a bully, and they are now independent left-wing MPs. They talk of him as an
Are they talking about Jeremy Corbyn?
Obstacle to the left. So there you go. That's yeah, it's going to be tricky for that little bunch. And what's happening I suppose you'll want to see a little bit of analysis of what the centrists actually represent. But before that, I just want to show you how this is comparable to what is happening in the UK. Mostly what I mean by that is the phenomena of liberalism as authoritarianism. We'll head to that in a second because
Liberalism is not authoritarianism. They are two different things, but okay.
UK, similarly, even though on the surface of it, it's an out-and-out landslide. The Labour Party have got 411 or 12 seats, and the Tory Party, their opponents have been decimated. On the surface of it, that seems to be the case, but with a little bit of analysis, we showed you this last week, you see that Reform got 4 million votes and only 4 seats, 5 eventually. Lib Dems got 3.4, I think it ended up being 3.7, and 69 seats, I think they ended up with 71 perhaps. And Labour won 2/3 of the seats with only 1/3 of the national vote. Now, the reason I'm interested in that is to show yet another disjunct between the electoral systems and the results of the elections. Now, in your country, the United States of America, there are quibbles and quarrels enough around voting machines and voter ID and mail-in votes.
There are not quibbles and quarrels about those things. right-wing nutcases are using that as the premise to attack democracy. Two different things.
What we're talking about here is the mechanic.
Oh my God, dude, I was doing so well, and now I can never catch up. This is a nightmare.
Of democracy itself. And while we're all sort of trying to understand how these maneuvers take place, 200 French candidates dropping out, 80 from Macron's party.
Okay, this is not a conspiracy, okay? This is just how the democracy works, literally. That is it. My God.
129, no, it's the reverse, isn't it, of this new alliance. They dropped out to make way for one another to ensure that they won tactically. I wonder what you think the ethics of that are, because that's not flat out representation of the will of the people. It might be...
Yes, it is. It is literally democracy, okay? What France did is democracy. That's how the democracy works. This dude is such a joke.
Necessary. It might be, you might even call it a necessary evil, the same way as accepting donations from corporations, from big pharma, from big tech.
No, those are not necessary evils. Those are evils that need to be erased from the planet. You know, taking giant donations from big corporations. What he's referring to here is not a necessary evil. It's democracy.
From the military, that's described as a necessary evil. But once you take on all these necessary evils, what you've necessarily gotten left with is evil, an evil system that can only mask its evilness through banality, not even through the pretense of good, although perhaps a beautiful way to describe wokeness would be the pretense of good, because none of you surely are making an argument that we should be discriminating against people on the basis of race or
no one is making that argument.
Or their sexual preferences. Surely any awakened and enlightened person knows that our first...
All right, let me rephrase. No one is making that argument, but you know what the right is doing? Writing legislation that effectively discriminates against people based on their sexual orientation or their race or whatever. In practice, that's what happens. That's what they're doing. All right, I'm restarting this one. The left is not doing that. However, the right loves to accuse the left of doing that. Oh my God. It's like their favorite pastime.
First duty is non-judgment. Surely we know that our ultimate duty is to live in a state of love. But the problem with wokeness is that it cannot live by the virtues it espouses.
Like, how did we get to wokeness, quote unquote, from the French election? Wokeness can't live by the virtues it espouses. Okay. So wokeness's goals are unachievable, is what he's saying. Is that fair to say?
It uses them but as a veneer to mask the globalist corporatism that we're all describing. Otherwise, if you were truly woke, it was like, I believe in the rights of these religions or these minorities, or, insert whatever idiom or synecdoche is required to complete that sentence, you wouldn't be pro-war, would you? You wouldn't be pro the jailing of Assange.
I feel like if I miss two words, if I'm just focusing on something else for just 2 words, everything else he says is nonsensical. It's already borderline nonsensical by default. All right, just step back one more time.
To mask the globalist corporatism that we're all describing. Otherwise, if you were truly woke, it was like, I believe in the rights of these religions or these minorities, or, insert whatever idiom or synecdoche is required to complete that sentence.
I don't know what a synecdoche is.
You wouldn't be pro-war, would you? You wouldn't be pro the jailing of Assange. You wouldn't be pro global institutions that do not respond to the electorate at all, like the W.
Okay, I don't actually know anybody who is in favor of Julian Assange being jailed. He is in jail, and I think maybe he should be. And either way, it's above me, so I'm just not going to speak to it, because I have no clue. I know very little about the situation, not enough to really speak to it. And from what I do know, it seems to me like he probably should be in there. But what does that have to do with being woke? I don't understand. How are the things connected to each other?
WHO or the WEF or the World Bank or NATO, all of those things that are functionally giants now, giants among us, indefatigable, unbeatable entities that can't be controlled by ordinary people. A true leader would surely oppose those things. Now, you will know who...
I don't understand. Where did this connection come from?
Who your elected representative truly represents when you see them in action. And it seems that Keir Starmer, like Tony Blair before him, that uber globalist...
All right, I'm restarting. Actually, I'm going to retire this race and do another one because this is terrible. Sorry.
Representative truly represents when you see them in action. And it seems that Keir Starmer, like Tony Blair before him, that uber globalist, is strongly affiliated to the globalist project that similarly has in its palm Emmanuel Macron. Still the
I don't know how he got here. I don't know what he's talking about. This dude is just full of shit all the way down.
president of France, and I think he will remain for another couple of years at least.
Our country needs a bigger reset.
We need a great reset.
Are you surprised that your prime minister...
Yeah, here's the Great Reset stuff. This is just nonsense. They were saying they want to take this opportunity to reset the economies to be more beneficial to the working class and the poor. There's nothing bad about that. Absolutely. Yes, I'm all for it. What is the bad part here?
Didn't show up to Davos?
Yes.
Davos, by the way, is where the World Economic Forum is held, I believe. So when they say Davos, that's what they're talking about.
I think our Prime Minister should have showed up at Davos. I absolutely do. And one of the things that's been...
Okay, Prime Minister that does show up to Davos.
Impressed on me since I've been here is the absence of the United Kingdom, and that's why it's really important that I'm here and that our Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves is here as a statement of intent that should there be a change of government, and I hope there will be.
Doesn't that sort of seem like a middle management mob figure showing up to pay tribute to the heads of the five families? You know, we're here to show...
Davos, or the World Economic Forum, is part of the five families, or is it like tantamount to the five families? What? Where are these people's heads? How did they like come to these conclusions? This is nonsense. This has to be just fabricated outrage by like rich nutcases, right? Who like are obsessed with keeping their money. I don't know how else you can possibly come to these conclusions otherwise.
Show you that when we're elected, we bloody well will come. And I'd invite you not to look at the backdrop and the 666 configuration that runs from...
Oh, yeah, that's another thing. They find sixes all over the place with the World Economic Forum. They're obsessed with how many sixes there are connected to this organization. WEF, that's 3 letters. WEF and Davos, that's 2 different locations or 2 different things. 2 times 6 or 2 times 3 is 6. How about that? Suspicious, huh? I mean, I'm not even joking. That's what they're doing. That level of stuff.
Through the O's in the words World Economic Forum. Ah, the beast is risen and he's dull.
The United Kingdom will play its part on the global stage in a way I think it probably hasn't in recent years.
Play its part. The UK will play its part on the global stage. What does that mean? Does that mean to be the recipients of migrants? Does that mean to participate in wars? Does that mean to...
It means to better society with their money.
Participate in the plunder of vulnerable nations. It seems to
No, that is not what it means.
me a new consensus is emerging around the subject of migration, that most countries now want individual sovereignty, want the control of their borders, don't want to be involved in international wars, and are no longer willing to support globalist corporatist projects that rely on their flags and their names and their tax dollars, but enrich only an elite that stands ahead, above and beyond of all nations. Corporate elites that find ways of avoiding paying taxes, find ways of navigating the bureaucracies of nations.
Yeah, so what he's doing is he's tying bad things to things that he thinks are bad, even though they're not. Like, immigration is not a bad thing. It's actually a very good thing. But the right, the political right, has always stood opposed to immigration, always. Like, Hitler used immigration as the basis for his fear-mongering campaign about Jews all the way back, you know, in the 40s or whatever, the 30s. That was the whole bit. Jews bad, or immigrants bad, that means Jews bad. And somehow he arrived at, damn it, I lost. And somehow he arrived at big corporations? How are the two things connected to each other at all? I don't understand.
That stands ahead, above and beyond of all nations. Corporate elites that find ways of avoiding paying taxes, find ways of navigating the bureaucracies of...
What does that have to do with immigration?
Nations that they use as to we can't avoid them bureaucracies. Is basically what I'm saying. You try avoid paying taxes.
But we are very
Oh, wait, I think he meant syntactically. Oh, okay. That would make more sense. Yeah, all right.
Find ways of navigating the bureaucracies of nations that they use as to we can't avoid them bureaucracies. Is basically what I'm saying. You try avoid paying taxes.
But we are very proud
This is Klaus Schwab. He's the leader of the World Economic Forum.
of now the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina, and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets.
My
Oh, they're penetrating the cabinets, baby. They've penetrated this cabinet.
government will serve you. Country first, party second.
Davos or Westminster?
Davos.
Right. Davos is, I guess, supposed to represent like international corporation power or something, even though it's just an organization to help people find the best way to spend their money. Holy shit.
There you have it, baby. He's a chip off the old block. But actually, let's do this Macron thing now. Have a look at this. So the idea of authoritarianism and liberalism ought be oxymoronic. Authoritarianism being the opposite of liberty and therefore liberalism.
He does not understand what those words mean.
But Emmanuel Macron, still president of France, maneuverer in elections, now stands as the most obvious example, and perhaps the most powerful example, of authoritarian liberalism. You can certainly
Holy shit, dude. I'm so bad at this game. It's not even funny.
make the case that in your country, the Democrats, while using recognizable rhetoric around the culture wars and pretending to be progressive, are similarly an authoritarian liberal movement. What I mean by that is, do they give you a choice as to whether or not there are going to be wars? Do they give you a real choice around the sovereignty of your nation's borders?
What does that mean? Do they give you a choice about wars? Does the right give a choice about wars? Does anybody? Nobody wants war, but every single right wing. Oh my God, dude. I cannot stand the Chocobo races. I'm only doing this to get items. It's very frustrating. Anyway, the right wing presidents of the United States have always been pro-war, just about for the last, I don't even know how many years, a long time. They've ginned up like culture wars and fabricated hate and anger over people just being different from them, and used that as a basis to start wars, like the Iraq War. Absolutely disgusting stuff. Now, which wars did left-wing presidents start that were not justified, like World War II, for example? And they didn't even start World War II. Like, which ones were started by left-wing? Which ones were started by the left? The right has always been pro-war, just about. He's claiming that the left is the bad guy here. Like, what?
Orders, do they give you a real choice as to how to respond to health crises? Are these the kind of things that you were invited to participate in? Was there a set of referenda? I wonder. Well, this might help us to understand what is meant by the phrase authoritarian liberalism. It certainly helped me to understand it. The shift towards security is perhaps the most striking aspect of Macronism. How do you justify authority? We're protecting you. Why have we got to stay in our homes? We're protecting you. Why have you got to take these injections? Well, you have to take them because we're protecting you and your grandma. Have you done clinical trials? Stop asking questions.
Yeah, clinical trials were done. Yes. What is he going on about right now? What was that?
Why have we got to stay in our homes? We're protecting you. Why have you got...
No, we're protecting everybody else. So it's in everyone's best interest to stay in your house for a little while, and not even stay in your house. I didn't stay in my house during COVID. I went to the park and walked around like the lake, like every day for a while, because it was so difficult to like stay inside 24/7. But I was away from people, and that's what was important. I did go to like my grandma's house every now and then, and I talked to her, hung out with her, Nothing wrong with the occasional, oh my God, dude, I was so close to not sucking at this, and now I suck again. Nothing wrong, even at the height of it, with the occasional visit, but you gotta understand that you might be getting somebody sick, so you have to be super careful. That's all. And they've turned this into like this big thing worthy of a persecution complex. This is just wild to me. How did they get here?
Got to take these injections? Well, you have to take them because we're protecting you and your grandma. Have you done clinical trials? Stop asking questions.
Yes, clinical trials were done.
Questions. We're protecting you from the answers of those questions. Macron replaced liberty with security and made this the cornerstone of his regime. So remember, we saw those young people celebrating at the beginning of this section.
Macron replaced liberty with security? How? What's he talking about? You know, the Patriot Act is a perfect example of somebody replacing liberty with security. You shouldn't replace liberty with security, ever, basically. There's a fine balance, I suppose. You know, I don't want to like live in fear of terrorist attacks 24/7. So I suppose in that sense, I'm okay with it to a degree, a little bit. But there is a line where it goes too far. What line did Macron cross? What specific thing did he do that this guy doesn't like?
What are those people celebrating really? They're celebrating rhetoric. They're celebrating idols. They're not celebrating policy because Macron's still in power and Macron is a globalist. Macron ain't going to do nothing to help those young people and their various ideals. Pretty soon they will be spilled and adrift in the streets of Paris, lost and bewildered, inadvertent flaneurs looking for something, going nowhere. That's sort of my prediction, because this kind of authoritarianism is anti-human. You don't want to be protected by the state. That's not the job of the state. Minimal protection.
Well, the job of the state is to protect people in some circumstances. It's to protect your rights.
Protections, I'm sure, a little bit of regulation, not these kind of odd forays into idealism. He replaced liberty with security and made...
Wait, you telling me that you think that protection from COVID is an odd foray into what?
That's not the job of the state. Minimal protections, I'm sure, a little bit of regulation, not these kind of odd forays into idealism.
COVID was an odd foray into idealism? Or like COVID, like lockdown, stop the spread stuff? Okay.
He replaced liberty with security and made this the cornerstone of his regime. Even before COVID-19, Macron had securitized the French state against internal threats. Inheriting a state of emergency imposed by his predecessor, François Hollande, after the 2015 Paris attacks, Macron passed many emergency powers into ordinary law. Remember, that was the last version of this, to protect you from terror, or as George W. Bush used to call it, terror. Remember, he wouldn't pronounce all the syllables, would he? Not all of the vowels.
Listen to this dude talking about people not pronouncing all the syllables. Wow. The height of irony right here, right?
Just terror, like that. It was...
Oh my God, dude, I'm so bad at this. All right, one more time.
Slightly like someone who had had a stroke trying to say it. It was terror that we were being protected from.
I don't know the point of this other than to make fun of somebody for how they speak. Far be it from me to complain about that. But check this out. I don't know if you guys have seen this before. It's really funny. Yeah, here. Have you guys seen this before?
In contrast, Russian elections are rigged. Political opponents are imprisoned or otherwise eliminated from participating in the electoral process. The result is an absence of checks and balances in Russia and the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of Iraq.
What was that? He's talking about Russia and Putin invading Ukraine, and he said Iraq. Whoopsie days. Just picked a whole bouquet of whoopsie daisies on that one.
Launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of Iraq. I mean, of Ukraine. Iraq, too. Anyway.
What was that?
75.
That's funny, right? He says Iraq, too. So he's acknowledging that it was fake, that the Iraq invasion was built on a lie.
You all know.
He's acknowledging that it was fabricated. That is wild to me. I never thought I would see the day. I love everything about it. That's my favorite one. Yes, it's so good. I need to download that.
It was terror that meant that we had to give the state access to private information. And remember that the Patriot Act that was passed in the...
Yeah, Patriot Act is bad. What act is he talking about in the French system or whatever that's comparable to the Patriot Act? What is he talking about? What is he complaining about right now?
The aftermath of 9/11 is still operative. You are still spied on by your state. Why? Because they're protecting you. So Macron is merely one observable symptom of a global...
Now, wait. Where did Macron come into this? Again, where is France in this equation? Why is he talking about, like, the French system and The Patriot Act. Does he think that Macron enacted the Patriot Act or something?
Phenomena of authoritarianism that masks itself as liberalism. That's why it's significant. Okay, effectively, into ordinary law, effectively making the state of emergency permanent. Permanent emergency is another one of the themes of authoritarian liberalism.
Authoritarian liberalism? Really? It's one of the themes of liberalism? Permanent emergency is how Hitler managed to, like, seize control away from others. It's through the Enabling Act. That's how Hitler did it. It was an act that allowed him to write laws himself without, like, the help of Congress or without Congress's, like, involvement or whatever. And yeah, permanent, like, emergency situations necessitate emergency action, of course. So I don't know of a good way to get around that problem. Sometimes you absolutely need to do things like on the spot immediately. Like when a hurricane hits or something, you know, you don't want to sit around waiting for Congress. But guess what? Sometimes you have to. Alexa, who was the U.S. president during World War I? Maybe it was Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson, I think, took the Treaty of Versailles into Congress. So during World War I, Germany lost. They were, like, in the process of losing, and they sent delegates to the front lines to sign an agreement with the Allied powers, like the United States and others. And it was like literally every 60 seconds that this was not signed, every 60 seconds we were waiting for a result, men were dying. People were losing their lives. Families were being torn apart every 60 seconds, like en masse. Millions of people were dying or died in World War I. And the president of the United States, I think it was Woodrow Wilson, had to take the Treaty of Versailles in to Congress for approval. He had to get them to sign it. So they like called an emergency thing, like what do you call, like an emergency, well, I don't know what you call it, you know, an emergency meeting in the House. And Woodrow Wilson walked out onto the House floor, like, to get them to sign it, and they all signed it, and it was, or no, I don't think they signed it, but, you know, there was some negotiation. Anyway, the point is that brought an end to the war. Yeah, people die for every minute that this shit is not done. That does not justify deleting checks and balances. It just doesn't, in my opinion. So the checks and balances are there for a reason. Anyway, tell me what you think about these people and what they had to say. Absolutely insane to me.